Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Unboxed. Tonight we're going to unbox building the Black family and overcoming white supremacy. Stick around. I'm Dr. Robert Davis, family life educator and relationship coach, and welcome to Unboxed, a frank and straightforward conversation about relationships. We're going to talk about family, church, workplace, and all other types of relationships. Join me for the next few moments as we unbox the power and potential of relationships and help you to live your best life. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Unboxed. I'm your host, Dr. Robert Davis. So glad that you chose to join and to be with us today. I'm going to ask you before we get started to please like, subscribe, and share. That's right, like, subscribe, and share. Okay, we are talking about building the Black family. That's what we're really looking at, building the Black family. We're looking at different aspects of it. And so as we talk about the psychological and emotional realities of the African-American family, one of the things that I wanted us to hone in on is how white supremacy manifests itself. So we're on a journey to understand how to build the Black family. And so for the past few episodes, we have been attempting to understand the historical realities that have shaped the Black family and the emotional and psychological impact it has had on the way that we function as African Americans and as African American families. It is so important to understand how your family's emotional computer was pre-programmed. On the subject of how Black families function, yesterday we talked about how Blacks often suffer from white supremacy. That's right, how Blacks often suffer from white supremacy. And I'm not talking about they suffer because whites are white supremacists. I'm talking about how we ourselves as Blacks are white supremacists. We explored a very brief history of how this thinking, how too many African Americans are white supremacists, and how that thinking has taken root among Black people and how it has came to be. And we even identified certain behaviors for how Black families to be on the lookout and to be intentional about countering. All right, so we even looked at certain behaviors last night. All right, and so how do I counter this? How do I counter this reality that our society, our media, our history, and everything has pre-programmed the African-American family to lean toward white supremacy? And all white supremacy means is the belief that white is supreme, that white is better, that white is superior. And we even talked about there's certain things to identify. I'm going to get a little bit more into those today. So how do I counter that? First, and this is what we learned yesterday, and I'm going to get into the other two. First, Black families have to identify where white supremacy is being embraced in your family. That's number one. Put that up on the screen. That's number one. Black families have to identify where white supremacy is being embraced in your family. In other words, investigate your thinking. And I really want you to sit down and go through your childhood, go through your life, go through media and all this other stuff even today, and think about what are the images and the messages that have been pressed upon you from the day that you were born, that even predate your birth, go all the way back as far as you can go, and think about, how that thinking has been pressed upon us. All right. So after you do that, we talked about that yesterday, investigate your thinking. The second thing I want you to do is I want you to do not, here's what I want to say. Do not have two sets of rules. One for how you interact with whites and one for how you interact with Blacks. Basically what I'm saying here is that you ought to have a set of guiding principles that lead your entire life, and not one set of principles for how you interact with Blacks and one set of principles for how you interact with whites. I'm gonna give you an example of what I'm talking about here. Too often, when we're dealing with a contractor or we're dealing with something in business, a white painter will come to our house. They'll show up late. They'll do a sloppy job. They won't finish on time, all those other things. And what we'll say is, I am never again going to use Bubba's painting service. A Black painter comes to our house, shows up late, does a shoddy job, doesn't finish on time, all those other things. And you know what too many of our African-American people say? That's why I don't use Black contractors. That's why I don't deal with Black people. You notice that two sets of rules. One set of rules says if a white company does me wrong, I won't deal with that white company, but I'll deal with another white company. But if a black company does me wrong, I'm not dealing with any black companies, period. I'm just sick and tired of black folk. They get on my last nerves. Now, if you have a rule in your heart, in your life that says that you will no longer conduct business with any race that doesn't perform, then be consistent about it. But don't have, and this is important for you to think about, do I have two sets of rules? Do I talk to whites one way and I talk to blacks another way? Do I tolerate this from whites and don't tolerate that from blacks, or vice versa? You know, one of the ways is to be consistent in your interactions, consistent in how you live out the guiding principles of your life. So that was number two. Do not have white rules and black rules. The third thing that I want to share with you is embrace blackness in your family. And I want to say this, God has blessed me with a tremendous son-in-law. And one of the things I love about my son-in-law is that he is very intentional about embracing blackness in his family. He doesn't just buy Barbie dolls that have black skin. It's a white doll baby with black skin. He wants to make sure that any doll baby he buys for his daughters, that they have obvious African-American features, nose, lips, the texture of the hair and everything. He wants his children to see them. He will not read his children Bible stories. He will not read them children's stories that are over white. In other words, if it's not highlighting and illustrating black folk, he does not allow his 3-year-old, 5-year-old, and 6-year-old daughter to be exposed to it. I applaud him for that, because one of the reasons that we have white supremacy in the first place, and that is whites who are white supremacists, is because all their life they have been intentionally shown images of white cultural excellence. I mean, even when they are not a part of the history of, even when, you know, it's not their cultural history, they'll inject themselves into Egyptian history. They'll inject themselves into Babylonian history. They'll inject themselves into Jewish history or whatever it may be. They say, hey, you know what? We weren't even in Egypt, but, you know, we're still going to make ourselves a part of it because we want to, anything that happens successful in this world, we want to make sure that our name is written on that culturally. But here's the good news. There's so much great that Africans have done and African Americans have done. You don't have to inject yourself. All you have to do is embrace it with your family. So embrace the blackness in your family. I'll never forget about embracing blackness. My aunt, who would be about 78 years old, she died, but she would have been about 78 years old. And I'll never forget, her favorite doll baby was in the room that I would stay in when I was at my grandparents' house. And it was a white doll baby. I'll never forget how it looked. It was one of those, you know, would probably be quite expensive today because of its antique value. But, you know, there's just that beautiful little white doll baby with the marble eyes or the glass eyes and all of that stuff. And that's what she was exposed to as a child as it relates to. So think about it. She's a black child, and her first longing is for the white baby. And we looked last night at the whole black doll, white doll experiment that was done in the 1940s, which was conducted by a black couple psychologist team, rather. We have to be intentional in exposing our children to black culture and black historical excellence. We have to be intentional about this. It's not just something that's going to happen by osmosis. You have to be intentional about having your children to watch movies about black excellence in history. You have to be intentional about having your children read things about black excellence. You have to be intentional about this. Black history, remember, started with the birth of civilization. It did not start on the slave ship. Black history started with the birth of civilization. It did not start on the slave ship. Your children have to see that. You have to teach them that. That has to be a part of the narrative that you constantly reinforce in their lives. I'll never forget, and I'm talking about white supremacy and why you have to be intentional about this. I was at the seminary, and it just so happened that at the museum in Chicago, there was a display from Egypt. They brought all these ancient Egyptian artifacts. It was phenomenal. At the time, I was taking a class in Egyptian history. And I had my daughter with me because at the time I was a single father. And I had my 4-year-old daughter with me, and we're walking through there. And because I was intentional at the time about exalting Black excellence, cultural excellence. My daughter looks at me as she's looking at all of these things and she says, Dad, were the Egyptians Black? Now, I never got into a conversation with her about the fact that the Egyptians and the Nubians were, in fact, people of dark complexion, skin, melanated people. Never had that conversation with her. And I told her, I said, yes, they were Black. And this Caucasian girl who was not invited to be in our conversation just could not stomach the fact that perhaps Blacks built the pyramids and perhaps Blacks introduced the entire world to philosophy and to literature and all those other things that Egypt gave to the rest of the world. So she just chimes in and says, well, we don't know if they were Black or white. I looked at my daughter because I don't want to dignify what she said with a response. I looked at my daughter and I said, Leah, the Egyptians painted themselves as Black. Sweetheart, they were Black. And I just wanted to say that because the whole culture, and I've gone a little bit over than what I normally do, the whole culture is designed to lean us toward this belief of white superiority. And one of the things as we look to strengthen the Black family is we have to be intentional about saying, you know what, I am going to exalt. Now, exalting Black excellence doesn't mean that you have to put down white people. No, you don't have to do that. You don't have to criticize and belittle. You don't have to do any of that. To exalt your own and to say, hey, listen, you have something to be proud of. And Black families have to embrace this, the James Brown motto. Say it loud. I'm Black and I'm proud. All right. I'm going to end off right there. I went a little bit over. I thank you for your indulgence. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about how the American lie from 1776, the American lie has caused something called moral injury on both Black and white families. We're going to talk about that tomorrow. So make sure that you tune in. Like, subscribe, and share. And join us back tomorrow night as we continue to unbox the power and the potential of the Black family.
Seasoned with Grace, Unboxed also provides healthy relationship training and leadership development for businesses, churches, and community organizations. For a free consultation to discuss your team's needs, please contact us at our website at swg-unboxed.org. That's swg-unboxed.org.